She thought it was just another Tuesday night shift at a cheap diner. She was wrong. When a terrified 7-year-old boy scrambled behind her counter begging for silence, Elise didn't hesitate. She stood between a trembling child and the barrel of a loaded gun. She didn't do it for money. She didn't do it for fame. She did it because it was right. But Elise made a mistake. She thought she was saving a random runaway. She didn't realize she was holding the only son of Dominic Moretti, the city's most ruthless Mafia don. And tonight, that act of kindness is about to start a war. Watch closely. This is the story of how a waitress became the queen of the underworld. The neon sign of Miller's 24-hour diner buzzed with an irritating insect-like hum, flickering against the relentless downpour that hammered the streets of Chicago. Inside, the air smelled of stale coffee, lemon cleaner, and damp wool. It was 2:45 a.m. The graveyard shift. Elise rubbed the back of her neck, wincing as a knot of tension flared near her shoulder blade. She was 26, but tonight she felt 50. Her apron was stained with grease from the fry cook's mishaps, and her feet throbbed in her worn-out sneakers. She looked at the tip jar. $11.40. It wasn't enough to cover the electric bill, let alone the rent for her studio apartment on the south side. "Jerry, I'm going to lock the front for a second, while I mop the entryway," Elise called out to the cook, a man who spoke more to his burgers than he did to people. "Yeah, sure, whatever," Jerry grunted from the back, scrapping a spatula against the grill. Elise grabbed the mop bucket, the wheels squeaking across the checkered linoleum. The diner was empty, save for old Mr. Henderson in the corner booth, who had fallen asleep over his apple pie an hour ago. She moved toward the glass door, watching the rain blur the headlights of passing cars on Wacker Drive. Suddenly the door flew open. It wasn't a customer. It was a blur of motion. A small figure collided with Elise's legs, nearly knocking the mop handle into her teeth. "Hey, careful." Elise started steadying herself. She looked down. Clinging to her apron was a boy. He couldn't have been more than 7 years old. He was soaked to the bone, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, his small chest heaving with terrified gasps. But it was his clothes that paused her breath. He wasn't wearing generic department store clothes. He wore a tailored navy blazer, now ruined by mud, and dress shoes that looked like they cost more than her car. "Please," the boy whispered, his voice cracking. He looked over his shoulder at the dark street. "Please hide me. They're coming." Elise's maternal instincts, usually reserved for her younger sister back in Ohio, flared like a match in a dark room. She dropped the mop. She knelt, ignoring the dirty water soaking her knees. "Who is coming? Sweetie?" she asked, her voice low and steady. "Where are your parents? The bad men?" He whimpered, tears mixing with the rain on his face. "They hurt the driver. Please, don't let them take me." The terror in his eyes was absolute. This wasn't a tantrum. This was primal fear. Elise didn't ask another question. She didn't call the police, not yet. There was no time. She grabbed his small, freezing hand and pulled him behind the long service counter. "Get in the cabinet under the soda fountain," she ordered softly. "There's a cutout in the back for the pipes. Squeeze in there and stay quiet. Do not make a sound, no matter what you hear. Do you understand?" The boy nodded frantically and scrambled into the dark, cramped space amongst the boxes of syrup and cleaning supplies. Elise shut the cabinet door just as the bell above the diner entrance jingled aggressively. She stood up, smoothing her apron, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She grabbed a rag and pretended to wipe down the counter, forcing her face into a mask of tired indifference. 2 men walked in. They didn't look like the usual late-night drunks or truck drivers. They wore long, dark trench coats that absorbed the light. They were big, not gym big, but heavy solid, like concrete pillars wrapped in wool. The one in front had a scar running through his left eyebrow and eyes that looked like dead fish. The second man was younger, twitchy with a hand buried deep in his coat pocket. They didn't sit down. They walked straight to the counter. The smell of rain, expensive cologne, and metallic ozone followed them. "We're closed for seating," Elise said, her voice flat. "Coffee to go only." The scarred man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We're not hungry, sweetheart. We're looking for a kid, little boy, dark hair, runaway. His daddy is very worried about him." Elise didn't blink. "Haven't seen any kids. It's 3 a.m. Kids are in bed." The man leaned over the counter. He was close enough that she could see the pores on his nose. "Don't play games. We saw him turn this corner. There's nowhere else to go." "Maybe he ran down the alley," Elise suggested, shrugging. "I've been mopping the floor. Nobody came in here." The twitchy man behind him spoke up. "Check the back, Luca." Elise stepped to the side, blocking the path to the kitchen. "You can't go back there. Insurance policy. Customers stay in the front." Luca, the scarred man, laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound. "We ain't customers." He reached out his hand, moving with terrifying speed, and grabbed Elise by the wrist. He twisted, hard. Elise gasped, dropping the rag as pain shot up her arm. "Listen to me," Luca hissed. "I don't have time for the brave citizen act. Give us the boy, and you walk away with no broken bones. Keep lying and I'll break your pretty face." Elise looked at the cabinet door near her knees. She thought of the boy's terrified eyes. She thought of the expensive shoes. She realized then that these weren't kidnappers looking for a ransom. They were cleaners looking to tie up a loose end. If she gave him up, the boy was dead. She looked Luca in the eye. "I said I haven't seen him." Luca sighed, looking almost disappointed. He released her wrist and backhanded her across the face. The force of the blow knocked Elise backward. She slammed into the soda fountain glasses, shattering on the floor around her. The metallic taste of blood filled her mouth instantly. "Check the back," Luca commanded the younger man. "I'll search the front." "Hey." Jerry the cook finally emerged from the kitchen, wielding a heavy frying pan. "What the hell is going on out here?" The younger man didn't even slow down. He pulled a pistol from his coat, a matte black Beretta with a silencer attached, and pointed it at Jerry. "Sit down, old man, or the next burger you flip will be in hell." Jerry froze the pan, clattering to the floor. He raised his hands, his face draining of color. Elise scrambled to her feet, her cheek throbbing. Luca was tearing through the booths, looking under tables. He was getting closer to the counter, closer to the cabinet. "He's not here," Elise screamed, trying to draw his attention. "Check the cameras. We have cameras." It was a lie. The dummy cameras in the corners hadn't worked since 2015. Luca ignored her. He vaulted over the counter, landing heavily on the rubber mats. He began kicking the cabinet doors open one by one. Bang! 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 He was 2 cabinets away from the boy. Elise looked around desperately. Her eyes landed on the pot of freshly brewed coffee on the burner behind her. It was scalding hot. As Luca bent down to open the next cabinet, Elise grabbed the glass pot. Adrenaline slowed time. She didn't think about the consequences. She swung the pot with all her strength, smashing it against the side of Luca's head. Glass exploded. Scalding brown liquid splashed over Luca's face and neck. He roared a sound of pure animal rage and stumbled back, clawing at his burning skin. "You bitch! You dead bitch!" Elise didn't wait. She grabbed a steak knife from the drying rack and held it out, her hands shaking violently. "Get out! Get out, or I swear to God!" Luca recovered faster than any human should. His face was red and blistering, his eyes weeping, but his rage fueled him. He lunged. He caught Elise's wrist, twisting the knife out of her grip with effortless brutality, and slammed her against the prep station. his hand wrapped around her throat, squeezing off her air. "I'm going to peel you apart," Luca whispered. His vision blurred, but his grip like iron. The world began to go grey at the edges of Elise's vision. She clawed at his hands, but it was useless. Cling-ling. The door chime rang again. A strange silence fell over the diner. It wasn't just quiet. It was heavy. The air pressure seemed to drop. "Let her go," a voice said. It wasn't a shout. It was a baritone command, smooth as velvet and cold as ice. Luca froze. His grip on Elise's throat loosened just enough for her to suck in a ragged gasp of air. He turned his head, squinting through his burned eyes. Standing in the doorway was a man who made the diner feel very small. He was tall, over 6'2", wearing a charcoal three-piece suit that cost more than the entire building. His hair was black, slicked back, and his face was a sculpture of sharp angles and hard lines. But it was his eyes, stormy grey and utterly devoid of mercy, that froze the blood in Elise's veins. Behind him stood 4 other men. They held submachine guns openly, not bothering to hide them. "Boss," Luca stammered, his voice trembling. He released Elise, who slid to the floor, coughing. "Boss, we were looking for the kid. This bitch, she burned me." The man in the charcoal suit didn't look at Luca. He walked forward, his polished shoes crunching on the broken glass. He stepped past Luca, past the younger gunman, who was now shaking so hard he almost dropped his weapon. The man stopped in front of Elise. He crouched down, ignoring the coffee and grease on the floor. He looked at her bruised face, then at the knife on the floor, then at the cabinet. "Where is he?" the man asked. His voice wasn't angry. It was terrifyingly calm. Elise looked up at him. She saw the resemblance immediately. The same dark hair, the same brow. "Are you the father?" she rasped, her throat burning. "I am," he said. "I am Dominic Moretti." Elise exhaled, her body sagging. She pointed a shaking finger at the cabinet under the soda fountain. Dominic reached out and opened the cabinet door. Leo was curled in a ball, shivering. When he saw the man, he didn't recoil. He launched himself forward. "Papa!" Dominic caught his son, pulling him into a fierce embrace. For a second, the mask slipped. The cold warlord vanished, replaced by a terrified father clutching his child. He buried his face in the boy's wet hair, exhaling a breath he must have been holding for hours. "I've got you, Leo. I've got you," Dominic whispered. He stood up, lifting the 7-year-old effortlessly in his arms. He turned to the 2 men who had attacked Elise. The younger gunman dropped his gun. "Boss, we didn't know. Marco told us the kid was kidnapped. He said we had to retrieve him. He said Marco." Dominic repeated the name. He looked at Luca, whose face was blistering. "And you? Did Marco tell you to beat a woman? She attacked me." Luca whined. Dominic shifted Leo to his left arm, shielding the boy's eyes against his shoulder. "Leo, cover your ears." The boy obeyed, burying his face in his father's suit. Dominic looked at his security team by the door. He nodded once. 3 silencers coughed in unison. Thwip, thwip, thwip. Luca and the younger man collapsed to the floor before they could even scream. Elise screamed, scrambling backward until her back hit the refrigerators. She covered her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. She had just watched 2 men die. Executed. Dominic turned back to her. He handed Leo to one of his guards. "Take him to the car. Do not stop until you are inside the compound." "Yes, Don Moretti." The guard rushed Leo out. Dominic was alone with Elise now. The dead bodies were cooling on the linoleum a few feet away. He loomed over her, extending a hand. It was a clean, manicured hand. "Get up," he said. Elise stared at the hand. "You just killed them." "They touched what was mine," Dominic said simply, as if discussing the weather. And you protected what was mine. I just want to go home, Elise wept. Please, I won't say anything. I just want to go home. Dominic looked around the diner, the cameras, the dead bodies, the cook Jerry, who had fainted in the corner. Then he looked back at Elise. He saw her name tag. I cannot leave you here, Elise, Dominic said. The man who sent these dogs. He will know they failed. He will send more. He will come looking for the person who hid my son. If I leave you here, you will be dead by sunrise. I don't care, she sobbed. I do, Dominic replied. He didn't wait for her to take his hand. He reached down and pulled her to her feet. His grip was firm but gentle, unlike Luca's. You saved the heir to the Moretti crime family. That makes you responsible for him now. And it makes me responsible for you. He pulled off his suit jacket and draped it over her trembling, wet shoulders. It was warm and smelled of sandalwood and gunpowder. Come with me, he commanded, or stay and die. Those are your choices. Elise looked at the dead men. She looked at the rain outside. She looked into Dominic's grey eyes and saw that he wasn't threatening her. He was stating a fact. Trembling, she pulled the jacket tighter around herself, and she walked out of the diner, leaving her old life behind on the blood-stained floor. The ride to the Moretti estate was a blur of rain-streaked windows and suffocating silence. Elise sat in the back of the armoured SUV sandwiched between Dominic and the door. The leather seat was soft, smelling of new car and old money. A stark contrast to the cracked vinyl of the diner booths she had been scrubbing less than an hour ago. Dominic hadn't spoken a word since they left the city limits. He was on his phone typing furiously, his face illuminated by the harsh blue light of the screen. Elise stole a glance at him. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a cold, creeping numbness. She looked at his hands. The same hands that had held a terrified child so gently were the same hands that had ordered the death of 2 men without a second thought. Where are we going? Elise asked, her voice sounding small in the quiet cabin. Dominic didn't look up. Safety. My purse, she stammered. My phone. It's still at the diner. I need to call my sister. She's in Ohio. She'll worry if I don't check in tomorrow. Dominic finally locked his phone and slid it into his pocket. He turned to her, his grey eyes assessing her like she was a tactical problem to be solved. Your phone is being destroyed as we speak, he said calmly. Along with the security footage from the diner. As of tonight, Elise, you do not exist. Elise felt the blood drain from her face. What? You can't just, I have a life, I have rent to pay. I have a sister who depends on me. If you contact your sister, Dominic said, his voice dropping an octave, Marco will find her. He will use her to get to you. And he will use you to get to Leo. Is that what you want? Who is Marco? She demanded, anger momentarily overriding her fear. My brother, Dominic said. The words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. My younger brother, the man who wants my seat at the head of the table. The man who paid those men to kidnap his own nephew. Elise fell back against the seat, stunned. Fratricide. It was something out of a movie, not something that happened to waitresses who liked to read romance novels on their lunch breaks. The SUV slowed down as they approached a massive iron gate flanked by stone pillars. Armed guards, men, wearing tactical gear, stepped out of the shadows, nodded at the driver, and the gate swung open. They drove up a winding driveway, lined with ancient oak trees, until the house came into view. It wasn't a house. It was a fortress disguised as a mansion. It was a sprawling estate of dark stone and glass illuminated by floodlights. It looked cold, imposing, and impenetrable. The car stopped. A guard opened the door for Dominic, then for Elise. Come, Dominic ordered. He led her through the massive front doors into a foyer that was larger than the entire diner. The floor was black marble, reflecting the crystal chandelier above. A grand double staircase swept up to the second floor. A woman in a stiff grey uniform was waiting for them. She looked to be in her 50s, with hair pulled back so tight it pulled at her eyes. "Mrs. Rossi," Dominic said, shrugging off his wet jacket. "Take Miss Elise to the blue guest suite. Get her dry clothes. Have the doctor look at the bruise on her face." "Yes, sir," Mrs. Rossi said, eyeing Elise's grease-stained apron and dirty sneakers with thinly veiled disdain. "And young Master Leo." "Leo is with security in the East Wing. He is unharmed," Dominic said, his jaw tightening. "Double the guard rotation tonight. No one comes in or out without my direct biometric authorization. If a fly enters this house, I want to know about it." Dominic turned to walk away toward a set of double oak doors. "Wait," Elise called out. Dominic paused, half turning. "Am I a prisoner?" she asked, her voice trembling, but chin held high. Dominic looked at her for a long moment. He saw the fire in her eyes, the same fire that made her stand up to a hitman. "You are a guest under extreme protection," he said. "But for now, the answer is yes. Do not try to leave the grounds, Elise. The dogs are trained to hunt." He disappeared into his study, the heavy doors slamming shut with a finality that echoed in Elise's bones. Mrs. Rossi gestured up the stairs. "This way, miss, and please try not to drip on the marble." Elise followed the housekeeper, feeling like she had stepped through the looking-glass into a nightmare dressed in velvet. She was safe from the hitmen, yes, but she was trapped in the dragon's lair. The next morning, Elise woke up in a bed that felt like a cloud. For a confusing second, she reached for her alarm clock, expecting to see the peeling paint of her studio apartment walls. Instead, she saw silk wallpaper, a vaulted ceiling, and sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a manicured garden. Memory crashed down on her like a physical blow. The gun, the hot coffee, the blood. Dominic Moretti. She scrambled out of bed. Mrs. Rossi had taken her clothes the night before and replaced them with a selection of high-end loungewear laid out on a velvet chaise. Elise put on a pair of silk pants and a cashmere sweater that fit surprisingly well. She felt like an imposter. She opened the door to her room and peeked into the hallway. It was quiet. Too quiet. She walked down the long corridor, the thick carpet swallowing the sound of her footsteps. She needed answers. She needed to know how long she was going to be kept here. She reached the top of the grand staircase and heard a sound. A soft, rhythmic thump, thump, thump. She followed it down to the living area. In the center of a room filled with priceless art and Italian leather furniture sat Leo. The little boy was sitting on the floor, repeatedly bouncing a tennis ball against the wall. He was still wearing the pajamas he must have been given the night before. His eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. A tray of pancakes and fruit sat untouched on the coffee table. Dominic was there too. He was standing by the window dressed in a crisp white shirt and dark trousers, a cup of coffee in his hand. He looked exhausted. The confident warlord from the night before looked helpless in the face of his son's silence. "Leo, you have to eat," Dominic said, his voice straining for patience. Thump. Thump. Leo ignored him. "Leo, look at me," Dominic commanded sharper this time. Leo didn't flinch. He just kept throwing the ball. Dominic ran a hand through his hair and sighed a sound of pure frustration. He turned and saw Elise standing on the stairs. His expression hardened instantly, the mask slipping back into place. "You're awake," he stated. "Hard to sleep when you don't know if you'll wake up," Elise replied, walking down the remaining steps. She looked at Leo. "He hasn't eaten." "He hasn't spoken," Dominic said, keeping his voice low. "Not a word since we got it. The doctor says it's shock, trauma." Elise looked at the boy. She saw herself at that age hiding in the closet while her parents screamed at each other, wishing she could just disappear. She knew that look. It wasn't just fear. It was a loss of control. She walked past Dominic, ignoring his imposing presence, and sat down on the floor next to Leo. She didn't try to touch him or take the ball. She just sat there. "You know," Elise said softly, staring at the wall where the ball was hitting. "When I was your age, I used to hide under the porch when I was scared. It smelled like wet dirt and spiders. But it was safe." Leo's hand paused mid-throw. He didn't look at her, but he was listening. "But the problem with hiding," Elise continued, "is that you get really hungry, and spiders don't make very good pancakes." She reached out and took a strawberry from the untouched plate. She took a bite. Sweet. Much better than spiders. She held the plate out just slightly within his reach. Leo turned his head slowly. He looked at Elise, really looked at her. He recognized her. She was the lady from the diner, the lady who smelled like fries and rain, the lady who stood in front of the gun. Slowly, Leo reached out and took a piece of melon. He ate it. Then he took a pancake. Dominic watched from the window, his coffee cup forgotten in his hand. He had just spent an hour trying to command, bribe, and reason with his son with 0 results. This waitress with bruises on her face and no training had broken through in 2 minutes. Elise smiled at Leo. "My name is Elise. I think we forgot to introduce ourselves last night." "I'm Leo," the boy whispered. His voice was raspy. "Nice to meet you, Leo," she said. Dominic walked over. His shadow fell over them. Elise tensed, expecting a reprimand for interfering. "Thank you," Dominic said. The words sounded foreign in his mouth, like he wasn't used to saying them. Elise looked up at him. "He's not a soldier, Mr. Moretti. You can't order him to be okay." Dominic's eyes narrowed slightly. "I know what he is. He is my son." "Then stop looming over him like a tower," Elise said, surprising herself with her boldness. "Sit down." Dominic blinked. Nobody spoke to him like that. Not his captains, not his enemies, and certainly not the help. But he looked at Leo, who was now eating steadily, and he made a choice. The Mafia Don, the King of Chicago, hitched up his tailored trousers and sat down on the rug. For a moment it was a bizarre domestic tableau. A crime boss, a waitress, and an heir sitting on the floor eating pancakes. "I need to talk to you," Dominic said to Elise, keeping his voice low so Leo wouldn't hear the grim details. "About last night. My security team has been scrubbing your apartment. We found something." Elise's heart skipped a beat. "What?" "You have a passport," Dominic said. "You applied for a visa to Italy 3 years ago. Why?" "I studied art history in college," Elise said, looking down. "Before my mom got sick and I had to drop out to pay the bills. I wanted to see Florence. It was a stupid dream." "It wasn't stupid," Leo chimed in, his mouth full of syrup. "Papa is from Italy, Sicily." Dominic looked at his son, a flicker of softness crossing his face. "Yes, we have family there." He turned back to Elise. "Marco is making moves. He knows Leo wasn't secured by his men. He knows someone interfered. He will be hunting for a woman who fits your description." "So what do I do?" Elise asked. "You stay close," Dominic said. "You seem to be the only one Leo trusts right now. My staff, they are loyal, but they are cold. Leo needs—" He struggled for the word. "He needs a mother." Elise finished for him, then immediately regretted it. "I mean, a maternal figure." Dominic's face went blank. "His mother died when he was born." "I'm sorry," Elise murmured. "Don't be." Dominic stood up, the moment of vulnerability gone. "I have a proposition for you, Elise. A job." Elise stood up, too, dusting crumbs off her silk pants. I already have a job at Miller's Diner. Miller's Diner is currently a crime scene, Dominic corrected. And you can never go back there. Here is the deal. You stay here. You look after Leo. You keep him calm. You keep him safe inside these walls. In exchange, I pay off your sister's student loans. I pay off your mother's medical debts. And when Marco is dealt with, I give you a new identity and enough money to go to Florence, or anywhere else you want. Elise's breath caught. It was everything she had ever worried about. Money, debt, her sister's future solved in a sentence. But the cost was living in a house of killers. She looked at Leo. He was watching her with wide, hopeful eyes. He didn't want her to go. And if I say no? Elise asked. You can't say no, Dominic said softly. Because outside these gates, you are a dead woman walking. Marco doesn't leave loose ends. Here you are under my protection. Under my roof, you are untouchable. Elise looked at Dominic. He was dangerous, arrogant, and violent, but he was also a father who was desperate to protect his child. And frankly, she didn't have a choice. Fine, Elise said. I'll do it, for Leo. Good. Dominic nodded. Then welcome to the family, Elise. The intercom on the wall buzzed. Sir. The head of security's voice crackled through. We have a problem at the main gate. It's your brother. Marco is here. He says he wants to check on his nephew. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Dominic's eyes turned into shards of ice. Leo, Dominic said calmly. Go to your room with Mrs. Rossi. Play video games. Put on the noise-cancelling headphones. Leo scrambled up, looking terrified again. Is Uncle Marco bad? Go, Dominic ordered gently. As Leo ran upstairs, Dominic turned to Elise. He reached into his waistband and pulled out a small, sleek pistol. He held it out to her. Elise stared at it. I don't like guns. Take it, Dominic hissed. Hide it in your waistband. Stand behind me. Do not speak unless spoken to. You are the new nanny. You are invisible. Understand? Why is he here? Elise whispered, her hands shaking as she took the cold metal weapon. He's here to see if Leo is alive, Dominic said, checking his cufflinks. And he's here to see if I know what he did. If I show weakness, he strikes. If I accuse him without proof, he starts a civil war within the family. He walked toward the foyer. Showtime, Elise. Try not to look like you witnessed a murder last night. Elise took a deep breath, tucked the gun into the small of her back, and followed the devil into the lion's den. The double doors of the estate swung open, and Marco Moretti stepped inside. If Dominic was a fortress of cold stone, Marco was a viper draped in silk. He was younger, his features sharper, his smile too wide and entirely lacking in warmth. He wore a camel-colored coat and carried a wrapped gift box, playing the part of the doting uncle to perfection. Dominic stood in the center of the foyer, his hands clasped behind his back. He didn't offer a handshake. He didn't offer a drink. He simply occupied the space, radiating a dangerous, silent authority. Elise stood 3 feet behind Dominic, and to the left, hands folded demurely in front of her, concealing the hard lump of the pistol against her spine. Her heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs, but she forced her face into a mask of bored servitude. She focused on a spot on the marble floor, refusing to make eye contact. "Brother," Marco announced, his voice booming. "I heard about the security breach last night. I came as soon as I could. Is Leo safe? Leo is fine." Dominic set his voice flat. "He is resting." Marco's eyes darted around the room, scanning the guards, the shadows, and finally landing on Elise. He paused. A flicker of recognition passed through his eyes. Or was it just curiosity? Elise held her breath. "I don't recognize this one," Marco said, stepping closer. He smelled of expensive scotch and rot. "New staff. You didn't tell me Mrs. Rossi was hiring. This is Elise, Dominic said, stepping slightly to the side to partially block Marco's view, a subtle protective gesture. Leo's new governess. The previous one didn't work out. Marco circled Dominic, moving toward Elise like a shark sensing blood in the water. Elise, a pretty name for a pretty thing. Look at me. Elise slowly raised her head. She met Marco's gaze. His eyes were pale blue, soulless and searching. He was looking for fear. He was looking for the waitress from the diner. But Elise remembered the boy shivering in the cabinet. She remembered Dominic's promise. "Good morning, sir," she said, her voice steady, surprisingly deep. Marco narrowed his eyes. "Have we met your face? It reminds me of someone." "I have a common face, sir," Elise lied smoothly. "I just arrived from Ohio yesterday." Marco stared at her for a second longer, the silence stretching until it was almost unbearable. Then he laughed, a sharp, barking sound. "Ohio. Cornfields and cows. No wonder you came to the city. Well, Elise from Ohio makes sure you take good care of my nephew." Accidents seem to happen so frequently these days. The threat was thin and sharp as a razor wire. "I will," Elise said. Marco turned back to Dominic. "I brought Leo a new game console. I'll leave it here. Listen, Dom, we need to talk business. The shipment at the docks." "Not today." Dominic cut him off. "Today is for family. And you are leaving." Marco's smile faltered. The mask of the loving brother slipped, revealing the hatred underneath. "You're pushing me away, Dom. People will start to think you don't trust your own blood." "I trust my blood," Dominic said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "I just don't trust yours." Marco's jaw tightened. He adjusted his coat, his eyes flashing with suppressed rage. "Careful, brother. The throne is a lonely place to die." He turned on his heel and walked out. The heavy doors slammed shut behind him. Elise let out a breath that sounded like a sob. Her knees buckled, and she nearly collapsed, but Dominic's hand was there, gripping her elbow, holding her up. "You did well," he murmured, his face close to hers. "He suspects, but he doesn't know. That uncertainty will buy us time." "He's going to come back," Elise whispered. "I saw it in his eyes. He's not done." "Neither am I," Dominic replied. 3 weeks later. Life inside the Moretti estate settled into a strange, gilded routine. Elise was no longer just the waitress who saved a boy. She was becoming the heart of the house. She spent her days with Leo. The silence that had gripped the boy began to fracture. First it was giggles while they baked cookies in the massive kitchen, covering Mrs. Rossi in flour. Then it was reading Harry Potter aloud in the library. Finally, he started talking again. He asked about her sister. He asked about the diner. He asked if she would stay forever. And then there was Dominic. He was a ghost in his own house, disappearing into his study for hours, dealing with a war that was brewing on the streets of Chicago. But at night, he would find Elise. It started with small things. He would join her and Leo for dinner instead of eating alone. He would stand in the doorway of the library, watching her read to his son, a look of profound longing on his face. One stormy Tuesday night, Elise was in the kitchen making tea. The house was asleep. Rain lashed against the windows, a grim reminder of the night her life had changed. "Can't sleep." She spun around. Dominic was leaning against the island. He had discarded his suit jacket and tie. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the dark ink of a tattoo on his chest. He looked tired, human, and devastatingly handsome. "Just thinking," Elise said, turning back to the kettle to hide the flush rising in her cheeks. "About what?" Dominic moved closer. The air between them crackled with electricity. "About how long this can last," she admitted. "We're living in a bubble, Dominic. But bubbles pop. Dominic stopped right behind her. She could feel the heat radiating from his body. He didn't touch her, but his presence was a physical weight. "I won't let it pop," he said low in his throat. "I have dismantled half of Marco's crew in the last week. I have frozen his assets. I am choking him out. Soon he will be nothing." "He's your brother," Elise said, turning to face him. "Does that make it harder?" Dominic looked at her, his grey eyes searching hers. He reached out his hand, hovering for a second, before he tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His fingers brushed her cheek, rough skin against soft. "He tried to kill my son," Dominic whispered. "He ceased to be my brother the moment he gave that order." "But you," he trailed off. His gaze dropped to her lips. "Me," Elise breathed. "You are the only real thing in this house," Dominic said. "You walked into hell for a child you didn't know. You stand up to me when my own captains are afraid to speak. You have brought light into a tomb, Elise." He leaned in. Elise's heart hammered. She didn't pull away. She wanted this. She wanted the danger and the safety all at once. His lips brushed hers, tentative testing the waters. When she didn't recoil, he groaned low in his throat and kissed her properly. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was possessive, desperate acclaiming. It tasted of whiskey and suppressed emotion. Elise wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer, melting into the hard lines of his body. For a moment, the war didn't exist. There was only the rain, the heat of the kitchen, and the man who made her feel more alive than she had ever been. Boom! The sound wasn't thunder. It was an explosion. The kitchen windows shattered inward. Dominic tackled Elise to the floor, covering her body with his as glass rained down around them like deadly confetti. Alarms began to wail, a high-pitched shriek that signaled a perimeter breach. "Stay down," Dominic roared, rolling off her and pulling a gun from a holster attached to the underside of the kitchen table. "Leo!" Elise screamed, scrambling to her feet despite the glass cutting her palms. "Dominic! Leo is upstairs. Go!" Dominic shoved her toward the service stairs. "Get to him. Take him to the panic room in the master closet. I will hold them off. But go!" Elise ran. She ran through the dark hallways as gunfire erupted in the foyer. Marco hadn't waited to be choked out. He had launched a suicide run on the estate. Elise took the stairs 2 at a time, her lungs burning. The house was in chaos. The lights flickered and died, plunging the hallway into darkness, illuminated only by the muzzle flashes from the floor below and the emergency red strip lighting. She burst into Leo's room. The boy was sitting up in bed, clutching his teddy bear eyes wide with terror. "Elise!" he cried out. "It's okay. I'm here." She scooped him up, not caring that he was too big to be carried. Adrenaline gave her the strength of 10 women. "We're playing the spy game, Leo. Remember, we have to get to the safe base." She ran into the hallway, just as a shadow detached itself from the wall. A man in tactical gear stood between her and the master bedroom. He wasn't one of Dominic's guards. He wore a red armband, Marco's men. He raised a rifle. Elise froze. She had no weapon. The gun Dominic gave her was in her room down the hall. "Put the kid down," the man growled. Elise set Leo down slowly, pushing him behind her legs. "Run, Leo," she whispered. "When I move, you run to Papa's room." "No." Leo whimpered. Well, a voice came from the stairs. Marco strolled up, holding a silver pistol. He looked manic, his hair disheveled blood on his camel coat. "The nanny and the heir." Marco walked past the guard. He looked at Elise with a twisted admiration. I knew you, the waitress. My men were incompetent, but I am not. I should have killed you in the foyer 3 weeks ago." "You'll never get out of here alive," Elise said, her voice shaking but defiant. "Dominic will kill you." Dominic is busy, Marco laughed. My men have him pinned in the kitchen. The great Don Moretti is bleeding out on his own Italian tiles. Elise felt a cold spike of horror. Dominic. Bleeding. So, Marco raised his gun, pointing it at Leo's head. I think I'll finish what I started. Goodbye, nephew. No. Elise didn't think. She didn't calculate. She lunged. Not at Marco, she couldn't reach him. She lunged at the heavy antique vase sitting on the hallway console table. She grabbed it and hurled it with a guttural scream. It wasn't a perfect shot, but it didn't need to be. The heavy porcelain smashed into the guard's face. The guard stumbled back, his rifle firing blindly into the ceiling. Marco flinched, turning his head for a split second. That second was all Elise needed. She tackled Marco. They crashed to the floor. Elise wasn't a fighter, but she was fighting for a child's life. She clawed at his eyes, bit his hand, kicked and screamed. Marco roared in pain and backhanded her the pistol whipping across her temple. Elise's vision exploded in white light. She rolled away, dazed blood pouring into her eye. Marco stood up, panting, wiping blood from his cheek where she had scratched him. He raised the gun again, aiming it at Elise's chest. You annoying little bitch, he spat. Bang! The shot was deafening in the narrow hallway. Elise squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the darkness. But the pain didn't come. She opened her eyes. Marco was standing there, a look of profound confusion on his face. A small red blossom appeared in the center of his chest. He looked down at it, then back up. Oh, he whispered. He crumpled to the floor, revealing the figure standing behind him at the top of the stairs. It wasn't Dominic. It was Leo. The 7-year-old boy was holding the guard's fallen rifle. It was almost as big as he was. The recoil had knocked him backward against the wall, but he had pulled the trigger. Silence descended on the hallway. Elise scrambled over to Leo, pulling the gun from his shaking hands and kicking it away. She wrapped him in her arms, burying his face in her chest so he wouldn't see his uncle's body. I got the bad man, Leo whispered, entering shock. You saved us, baby. You saved us. Elise sobbed, rocking him. Elise! Dominic appeared at the end of the hall. He was limping, his white shirt soaked in blood on the left side, a gun in his hand. He looked at Marco's body. He looked at the guard. He looked at Leo and Elise huddled on the floor. He dropped his gun and fell to his knees, crawling the last few feet to them. He wrapped his good arm around both of them, burying his face in Elise's neck. I thought I lost you. The Mafia Don wept. I thought I lost you. The sun rose over a broken house. The windows were shattered, the walls riddled with bullet holes, and the marble floors stained. But the storm had passed. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Dominic's lawyers were already intercepting them, spinning a story of a home invasion and self-defense. Money would change hands. Evidence would disappear. That was the world they lived in. Elise sat on the back of an ambulance in the driveway, a blanket draped over her shoulders. A paramedic was stitching the cut on her temple. She watched the body bags being wheeled out. Marco. The end of a dark chapter. Dominic walked out of the house. He had refused to go to the hospital, allowing the private doctor to patch up the bullet graze on his ribs. He walked straight to Elise. Leo is asleep, he said softly. The sedative the doctor gave him is working. He is strong, like his mother. He didn't mean his late wife. He was looking at Elise. He shouldn't have had to do that, Elise said, her voice hollow. He's 7, Dominic. He shot a man. He protected his family, Dominic said firmly. In our world, that is the only law that matters. But I am done with this war. Marco is dead. His faction will scatter. The threat is gone. He reached out and took Elise's hand. His grip was warm and desperate. You are free, Dominic said. The words clearly pained him. "The contract is fulfilled. You saved my son. Twice. I will wire the money to your account. $5 million. You can go to Florence. You can go anywhere. You never have to look over your shoulder again." Elise looked at him. She saw the vulnerability behind the grey eyes. He was letting her go because he loved her enough to want her to be safe. He was giving her the exit door. She looked at the check in his hand. Then she looked at the broken house. She thought of Leo sleeping upstairs, who would wake up needing comfort. She thought of Dominic, the lonely king, who had finally found his queen. She thought of the fire in her own blood when she tackled Marco. She realized with a jolt that she couldn't go back to waiting tables. She couldn't go back to being ordinary. Elise took the check from Dominic's hand. Slowly, deliberately, she tore it in half. Then in half again. She let the pieces flutter to the ground like snow. Dominic stared at the paper, then at her, his eyes widening. "Elise, why?" "I don't want to go to Florence alone," she said, standing up to face him. She winced at the pain in her ribs, but stood tall. "And I don't want to leave Leo. He needs me." "And me." Dominic stepped closer, invading her space, his intensity returning. "Do I need you? You tell me, boss," she challenged him. A small smile playing on her lips. Dominic didn't answer with words. He cupped her face in his hands, treating her like she was made of precious, fragile glass, and kissed her. It was a promise, an oath. "You are not the nanny anymore," Dominic whispered against her lips. "You are the lady of this house. You are the only person who ever brought me to my knees." "Just don't make me cook," Elise laughed through her tears. "I'm sick of diners." Dominic chuckled, a true, deep sound that rumbled in his chest. "Deal." 1 year later, the video cuts to a montage of a beautiful garden wedding. Elise stands at the altar, wearing a dress that cost more than the diner she used to work in. She looks radiant, powerful. Dominic stands beside her, looking at her with absolute devotion. Leo stands as the best man, looking sharp in a tuxedo holding the rings. He looks happy. The shadow of the trauma is gone, replaced by the confidence of a boy who knows he is loved. As they kiss, the camera pans back, showing the guests not just mobsters, but politicians, judges, and the elite. They are all clapping. They all know the story. They know that the woman in the white dress is not to be trifled with. She was the waitress who protected a child she didn't know. Now she is the Queen of Chicago. And as Dominic whispers in her ear, Elise smiles directly into the camera. She knows one thing for sure: the rain brought her a storm, but it also brought her a kingdom. And that is how a single act of bravery changed a life forever. Elise didn't just save a boy. She saved a family and found a love worth fighting for. It proves that sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most beautiful destinations. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It helps us create more dramatic stories for you. Did you expect Leo to be the one to save them? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new episode. We have a thriller coming next week that will blow your mind. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.